So, any questions about anything? Yes?
At any point of writing, do you try and structure the chapter in any particular way?
Yeah, I do. I mean, that's... it normally structures itself. I write it first. I mean, this is quite an interesting chapter, and it starts off fairly mundane and ordinary, but with a kind of weirdness, and then a certain darkness takes over, and then you suddenly, there was a throw out of the rabbit was, of course, because you're reading the book and you've read the blurb, you know the rabbits are involved, but the throw out of the rabbit, you know, I think we say, I'm not, I think there's a line here in which I just throw it out there, which I kind of like. Hang on, let me find it, because it was quite important. I kind of like the way it worked. No, hang on, I'll get there. I will get there. Hang on. Oh yes, there we go. Quite aside from Connie's unexpected reappearance in my life, we don't know if she's a rabbit by now, of course. By right, she shouldn't be known at all, and not because she was a rabbit. The public, although technically allowed, so the fact that she's a rabbit is completely thrown away. I haven't made a big deal of it, and I actually only come back to describe her as a rabbit, as a wild stock, a little bit later, so there's another 3 or 4 paragraphs. So when you structure a chapter like this, you have all these elements that you want to bring into a first chapter, and the first chapter is really, really vital. So what's going on in the chapter is that they're doing a speed librarying. Right, that's what's going on in the chapter, but the subtext of what's going on in the chapter is, of course, what I'm trying to get across, and that is where you start structuring it, and you're introducing the characters. You introduce really the character of the village, which is clearly very, very right-wing and anti-rabbit, and then the character of mine, who seems to be within the people in the village, but has known Connie in the past. So there's clearly some connection there. There's obviously, there's some foreshadowing when I talk about the Battle of May Hill and Cordite and CS gas. So also I'm foreshadowing something that's going to happen, and a major part of the book, which is actually going to be going on there. So, I wrote the chapter first. I mean, for anyone who can remember me talking 2 years ago, it was much more unsubtle. But here I was actually trying to really sort of convey a sense of where we are and where we're going with the entire book on the first chapter. Ending the first chapter is quite difficult. So I did end up killing Mr. Beaton, and then I could end with, "I told you he looked unwell," said Stanley Baldwin, which is actually quite a good way to end the chapter, because you can see that the mallets who turn out to be antagonists in the book are clearly coming over to give Peter Knox a piece of their mind, but I didn't quite want to get into this chapter yet, so I had to stop the chapter. And the best way to stop it was with Mr. Beaton keeling over, and then I could just end it with that final line. So when you're writing a chapter like that, you have all these elements that you want to get in, and you just want to bring them in at the right time, to slowly bring them in. And when I was reading it, you saw I sped up with the excitement. I was trying to say, okay, this is a really exciting sort of library scene, and then of course you have this change of tone as soon as Connie arrives. And there's a few jokes in there, obviously, because hopefully I write funny jokes with a bit of food in them as well. And also then there is a sense of, yes, it sounds a bit worrying, and there's clearly some very unsubtle storytelling going on here, but there's still jokes as well. It's still meant to be light and funny, but with food as well as a bit of amusement. So all those elements have to come in, and it's a very weird, strange, dark art putting it all together. And I don't know fully how I do it, and I don't think any author really knows fully how they do it, or how we do it, but you just get a feel for it. You feel for when something is right. I didn't want to straight away describe what Connie looked like, the fact she was a rabbit, and then we go back, we just throw it away, because this is the world in which rabbits exist. Right? Rabbits are there, they exist, and of course Peter would not make a big thing about it, it's only later. So all these little elements, the way in which you bring them in, the way you treat them, how long you talk about them, is all really sort of very intuitive. So it's very difficult to sort of talk about how I do it, other than look on the page and explain why all these elements come in as they do, but hopefully it works from a storytelling point of view. It starts funny, starts silly, where am I going with this? Oh my god, there's a rabbit. Hang on a sec, everyone doesn't like rabbits in this village, where are we going from here? So there's a darkness to it, but there's a lightness to it, and clearly there's a bit of a romance there to it as well. So all these elements are kicking in. First chapter, very important. will you read chapter 2? That's obviously the big thing. If you read that chapter 1, I hope you're going to think, well, this is actually quite interesting. I wonder what happens next. And of course, then you're on to chapter 2, which is basically what you're trying to do with every chapter, is make people keep on reading and engage. Yeah.
And how many of those chapters exist so far?
This one?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You said you want us to want to read chapter 2. I'm wondering how many chapters exist.
Oh, I see. Oh, right, the whole book. Oh, yeah. The book's finished. Yeah, I'm just editing it. Yeah. The whole thing is done and dusted. Not dusted. It's done. It's not dusted. I gave it. It was 100,000 words, and I gave it. It was quite an early draft. Usually, I like to give quite finished drafts to my editor. But I gave them an early draft, really, because I had that creative hiatus with Early Riser, and I wanted them to know that as soon as Early Riser was done, 7 months later they had a new manuscript on their desk. So from a professional point of view, I needed them to know that I was there, so I wasn't going to leave it another 2 months. I thought it was more important to get an early draft out to them, just from a tactical point of view, if you like, or strategic. Carolyn, who's a brilliant editor, she's been editing my books for about 12, 13 years now. She came back and said it's a bit like 2 books. There's this kind of domestic potboiler at the beginning, and then the second half is like really action-packed, which it is. So she said, I think you need a little bit more sort of action in the first half, just to bring it into one book rather than 2. Which that's literally a sort of 5-minute conversation I had with her, and that's why she's the most fantastic editor, because she gets right to the nub of the problem, not the word-on-word stuff. She knows I can do that, but the big, broad brushstrokes. And I went away, and that's what I'm currently doing at the moment, is just adding on a lot more interest and excitement and jeopardy and complications in the first half of the book, yet maintaining in the background the sort of domestic sort of potboiler thing. Because it gets very complicated, because rabbits, although retaining much of their rabbitness, also have a lot of humanness. And of course, rabbits, if you know anything about rabbits at all, it's a matriarchy, again a word. Matriarchy, thank you. Quixotic.
Just remember Don Quixote.
I know, I say Quixote. And that's not right either, is it?
Yeah.
Oh. Anyway, so it's a matriarchy. Matriarchy. Okay, so it's a matriarchy. The rabbit society is a matriarchy, and males are essentially there as very, very large bodyguards who can also procreate at the same time. So in the rabbit book, that's been sort of updated to a humanness. So if you want to, it's called spousal procreation, but with the female's agreement. And if you want to do that, then instead of having a fight, right, then you'd actually have a duel with dueling pistols on a foggy heath at dawn with rabbits. And because rabbits don't like killing one another, because there's no point to it, they understand it's a losing strategy. The idea is, of course, to hit the ears, right, as low to the head as possible, but without killing them, right. So long-term rabbits, Lotharios, will have ears like colanders.
How does rabbit fire a pistol?
You don't have triggers because they've got no opposable thumbs. That's obviously a huge issue of your rabbit. But you can squeeze a modified dueling pistol. I tend to try to take care of a lot of detail. I was very delighted actually by an email I got from someone about, or a review rather, about Early Riser, where they just like the fact that I've thought of most things and that every sort of detail seemed to work. And that was again with the whole rabbit issue. What they like, what they don't like, what part of them of rabbits makes them rabbits, what parts of the human makes them human, and just merging the two together. And I kind of really like that. A bit like the bears, I suppose, the 3 bears in the fourth bear. Yes, let's go to the back there because that hand's been up for a while. Yell it out.
How are the phones adapted for if you have a mobile at the end?
How are phones adapted?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I think you can operate a mobile phone with pause.
Okay.
Just think. I mean, anything that Paddington could have done.
So it wouldn't be a touchscreen then?
It would probably be touchscreen. It is set in like 2022.
Okay.
It's set a few years from now. So Brexit's already happened.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be interesting.
You reckon?
Yeah.
How many times have you gone back in and edited it because Brexit's gone even more down?
I haven't. I've kind of, it's more about it's kind of a meta-Brexit, because it's about what one understands about one's nation now that the effect of Brexit. It's about the effect of the argument rather than, there are some things in it about Brexit and why the Brexit could be, well, no, it's a bit of a spoiler alert, but there's all sorts of stuff politically with UCARP, as it's called, the UK Anti-Rabbit Party, and why UCARP were pushing for rabbits, obviously, Anti-Rabbit Party. So there's a lot of that sort of technical stuff, but it's more about the not the spirit, but yes, the sort of meta spirit of Brexit and what it's kind of done to the nation and the divisions that are now much more easily seen, if you like. It's almost lifted a curtain, and people who were perhaps in the background and weren't saying things now are and have license to, and I think that's part of that, really. Yes.
Do you have pet rabbits?
Do I have pet rabbits? No, we have guinea pigs, actually.
I was wondering how you studied rabbits.
The interesting thing about rabbits is that no one studies them. And this is interesting. I mean, going back to like dodos and Neanderthals, which also feature in my books, you can become a world-leading expert on dodos with about 9 hours of hard reading. Similarly, Neanderthals, which allows me to do pretty much what I want with them. The thing about rabbits is that the book of rabbits, as they are understood, they were studied by this guy named R.M. Lockley. Right, so if you buy the R.M. Lockley Private Life of Rabbits and read that, you've probably got everything that everyone knows about rabbits, because no one's studied them, really, because they're kind of not really very interesting to study. Because if you had a choice of ring-tailed lemurs, baboons, right, tigers, elephants, or rabbits, where would you go? And the answer is not rabbits. Because essentially they're seen as a pest, they're vermin, and of very little interest. And Lockley did a huge amount of work on rabbits, almost obsessively, and what we know about rabbits is pretty much from his work that he did in the 50s, which is quite interesting. So I read that. He had an interesting quote, which I've got in front of me. To the human eye, each rabbit looks very much like the other. Beatrix Potter didn't like rabbits. It's quite interesting. She had pet ones that she used to draw, but after her first 3 massive kind of hits, because she had Benjamin Bunny, Tale of Peter Rabbit, and the Flopsy Bunnies, because that's a trilogy, right? And that was the one she was really famous for in the day, right? Then she got all sort of a bit, Sherlock Holmesy about it, and sort of didn't want to do rabbits anymore, because she got bored of them, and she just didn't like them after that. But they really turned her off rabbits, and then she carried on doing other ones. And I think she wrote the Tale of the Fierce Bad Rabbit, because she really didn't like rabbits too much anymore. So she wanted to show a bad, evil rabbit, and maybe that's why she wrote the Tale of the Fierce Bad Rabbit. But she much enjoyed, I think, afterwards, doing things like, my favourite, which is the Terror of Gloucester, with Simpkin, the cat. No more twist. Simpkin, the cat, who is one of the 2 of the only really realistic cats in fiction, right? Because Simpkin is hugely unpleasant. And I'll apologise to any cat owners here. I'm not a big cat person, I'm a big dog person. This is only my opinion. It's only my opinion, you disagree with me. But Simpkin, I think, is a very realistic cat, as is Mob, who is the other most realistic cat in fiction.
You're saying the Cheshire Cat's not
What about
realistic?
16 a Sid.
The which?
16 He went to all the houses on the street and had dinner at everyone.
Yeah, that's realistic. Yeah, that's very realistic.
Simon's cat.
Yeah. What?
Simon's cat.
Well, I don't know Simon's cat. Is it like just basically lazy and taking food off everyone?
No, it's abusive.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Not a cat lover, as you can see. But I apologise for anyone who does love cats. Yes, Jeff.
It's pretty clear that we're the sort of target audience, going to be liberal, pro-rabbit people. Did you have any difficulty in making sure that the bigots didn't have anything to identify and grab on with and identify with?
Well, no, they're only rabbits. Come on, Jeff. This is fiction. They're only rabbits. Why? What do you think they represent?
No.
If the cat fits, wear it.
I mean, the bad guys are obviously bigots and the enemies and the nasties.
Yeah.
Did you have any difficulty figuring out ways where it wouldn't be possible for a bigot to read the book and feel reinforced?
I don't know. No, I mean, I have to write books all my books kind of reflect my politics. Whether that's inclusion, social inclusion, or tolerance to diversity, or anything like that. So I have to really, write what I feel is right, and not worry about it. because you have to. Sometimes you have to write quite boldly, and sometimes you have to write with a bit of risk. Because if you're not, it's not really writing at all. I don't think it's particularly risky. This isn't something entirely new to me. When I was, I think with the Fourth Bear, we were talking about bear rights and the right to arm bears and all that kind of stuff. So it's just sort of carrying on a theme, really. But I can't worry about what people will think. Once you worry about what people are thinking when you're writing, you've got to write. You've got to be true to yourself when you're writing. You really do. And you've got to write what you think you want to write and what you want to say. And as long as you believe that what you say is yourself, then you're okay. If I was writing a book, to maybe pander to some audience that I thought was a massive audience that would really love it, then I wouldn't be writing what I wanted to write, and it would show. It really would. I think this is great fun. I love it. Rabbits, rabbits as a as a minority art. I think it works really well, and there are all sorts of ways in which you can just point out blatantly obvious injustices, blatantly obvious injustices within these sort of pages of a book about rabbits that I could never do about real injustices. I can actually do satirical injustices, which every bit is real and every bit is unpleasant. So well, I think it works, and you've got to have a feel. If I feel it works, I think then that's okay. Yeah.
I'm sure it does.
Well, thank you. Yes, indeed.
Does UCAP have any issues with the fact that the rabbits came over with the French?
I don't think they did. I mean, the rabbits origin. I mean, interestingly.
Also, the Romans, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, they came over from the Romans. I mean, there is an interesting aside, is that there's a conversation there where they're talking about, because there's big issues about citizenship, because rabbits aren't given citizenship. There's not a minimum wage, but a maximum wage as well, which has been set. But there is an argument, of course, that the rabbits say, well, actually, we've been here since Roman times. So, who's your grandfather to my character? And he goes, oh, well, Polish. So all the rabbits are actually far more British than everyone else in the book.
So presumably
but they don't have any paperwork. The only ones who have paperwork are there are three types of rabbits. I'll give you a little bit here, but keep it as a don't tell anyone. I'll spoil it. There are 3 different types of rabbits. There are 18 rabbits who were anthropomorphized, but there are 3 different types, right? There was wild stock, which is what Connie is. There's pet stock, right? Who came from pet stock, not very trusted, always a bit cozy with humans in the past, a bit dodgy, right? And there are lab stock, who are white, and with red eyes, and who have alphanumeric surnames like DG6715, because they were in life sciences labs. They're really good for carrying messages by the rabbit underground, because you can't turn a lab stock. Because any kind of forceful way in which you can try and extract information from a lab stock, if a lab stock has been vivisected in the past, there's no difference to last Tuesday. So there is a nice darkness you can bring in to the whole lab stock, wild stock, pet stock issue. But I kind of forgot your question. What was it? How did that relate to it?
Yes, well, you sort of get to, how does UCAP feel about
criticized
rabbits who've been in so long?
Yeah. So no, I don't. UCAP don't go for that. They're just anti-rabbits. They just don't like rabbits. Find them creepy. They're porophobic. So lots of people in it say, I'm not porophobic, but we've heard that before. Any more questions? Yes.
Do you ignore the fact that there are lots of wild rabbits, or do they all turn into?
No, only 18 of them actually. Wild rabbits are still small, dumb, and stupid, and are still sort of
rabbit stew
destroyed. Well, there are big issues about that as well. So there's all sorts of things that pop into it. I can see that you're dying to buy the book in February, but all these questions will be answered, because if you start thinking about it, this is what I'm sure I've talked to people in the past, you guys, and I've talked about the narrative dare. And when you say anthropomorphized rabbits, then of course the logical progression of the idea, then all of a sudden it really starts kicking off. And this is an idea with a lot of legs on it. Four at least. Yeah, the idea has lots of legs, so you can go to a lot of places with it. You know, a euphemistic reference to a pet stock, right? If you're a rabbit, would you call them a friend of Starsky? Which is kind of logical, isn't it? If they've spent their life in a so yeah, it has a lot of legs. It's a lot of fun. Well, I think so anyway. Yeah.
There's a book called The Rats of Nîmes,
Yes.
in which the rats, they're lab rats, and they're very, very highly intelligent because of, are your rabbits like that, the lab rabbits, are they more intelligent than super
I don't think so. I think they're all, I mean, all of them are vastly more intelligent than humans. All of them speak about 3 or 4 languages and grow up much, much faster, much more
Just the
intelligent.
lab rats or all the rats?
No, all the rabbits, all the rabbits. Yeah, but The Secret of Nim, wasn't it? And that was done by Rabbit Guy. Who wrote Wash It Down?
Richard Adams.
Richard Adams, right, Richard Adams. Yeah, I think he wrote Secret. Did he write Secret of Nim?
No.
Rats of Nim. Oh, I don't know. Anyway, when I was selling this to my editor, I said it's what was the rabbit book again?
Watership Down.
Watership Down. Yeah, I said it's Watership Down meets District 9. That was my selling point. That was my selling point, and it kind of still is. Because District 9, one of my favourite movies, certainly. Anyway, yes, question, Laura.
Have you ever gotten any strange hate mail, like somebody who was just really offended by some little detail in your book?
Have I ever had any hate mail? No, I can't really remember anything, actually. And I haven't been trolled on Twitter or anything, but then I don't engage on Twitter a huge amount. So, you know, I just use it to announce stuff, basically, and a few pictures and things. I think I got a couple of, they weren't really hate mails, they were just people who thought I'd mucked around with the classics in the air affair and how dare you and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think they were really serious. I think they were trying to sort of kick off an interesting, intellectual debate. But it was quite, heavy-handed. And I think he wanted it to be, sort of amusingly insulting, but it actually just came over as really insulting. So, but no, I haven't.
Jack, have you been rickrolled then?
Have I been rickrolled? I don't think so. Don't think so. No, well, I didn't use veracity in the end. Yeah, because I could have got some, people could have said nasty things about me, if I'd used veracity in early Riser, but I didn't in the end. We couldn't release him. We couldn't actually get him to say it was all right for him to appear. He was going to be, if anyone read the book, it's instead of Carmen Miranda, the Carmen. Yeah, somebody did that video, which is a pretty hokey video. Somebody did a version of it without the singing or the music, and all you can hear is the squeaking of his shoes and his clothes as it moves, and it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Anyway, yes.
You know the name you auctioned off last night?
The what, sorry?
The name that you auctioned for someone's name. Would they perhaps be a member of the Mallet family?
No. No, not a member of that, no.
Are they rabbits?
No, there's someone who works with, because Peter Knox, rather interestingly, works for RABCOT, which is the Rabbit Compliance Task Force. So he has some issues, clearly. He only works low level, but it's still working there. So, no, the name I was auctioning is someone who works at RABCOT as well. Yeah, the task force. More questions? Yeah.
Is there a possibility that characters from your different series might meet at some point?
Oh, good question. Characters from my different series might meet. I kind of did that there was a bit of crossover in one of the Thursday Next books, and Well of Lost Plots, wasn't it? There's Well of Lost Plots and Big Over Easy. Yeah. So there's a big crossover there because I thought it would be amusing to sort of have one sort of, you could read them together and go, I can see the joins now, but you could read them separately and never know there was a connection. So it was a kind of weird inferred narrative. Yeah, there's all kinds of little references here and there, and there would be some references here. I was trying to get all the titles of my books sneaking into the Constant Rabbit. So there's sort of someone says, rabbits are never early risers. Thursday Next comes in there somewhere, and I was trying to sneak as many as I can in, just for fun because it amuses me. As I'm writing. and they're little sort of little Easter eggs, if you like, for you guys. So yeah, I often put little asides. So I might do, but I think it's probably safer just to have one book about one characters and one book about another, rather than doing a sort of Predator meets Alien kind of thing. It's kind of weird. Although my take on the Predator meets Alien should always be that Iago meets Hamlet. That would be really good. I think the most frustrating thing about Hamlet is that everyone in the play, apart from him and the gravedigger, are pretty thick, really, and they don't have any repartee, and they can't cross swords intellectually with Hamlet in the way that he can and delight so with the gravedigger. But Iago, I thought, would be really good. Pitch Iago against Hamlet, that'd be the ultimate Alien versus Predator. Sadly, I am not enough of a Shakespeare scholar to do so. And
everyone would die.
Yeah, everyone would die. It would be a tragedy, certainly. Everyone would die. Iago actually has more lines than Othello, oddly enough. It should really be, Iago, actually, the play should be about him. But it's something that, what's his name?
Shakespeare.
No, the playwright.
Shakespeare.
No, not that playwright. An alive playwright. Tom Stoppard, thank you. It's the sort of thing that Tom Stoppard would do brilliantly. Brilliantly. Annoyingly, Tom Stoppard I can never meet now, because I swore years ago that if ever I met him, I would throw myself to his feet and scream, "I'm not worthy." And I kind of swore I'd do that in the days when I was never going to meet him, right? And now there is a chance possibility that I might. So I have to make sure that I don't. I would have to do that. It would be so embarrassing for us both. But he would be great. He would be the perfect person to do Iago versus Hamlet, and it would be fantastic. But you'd have to know both plays really, really well to fully appreciate, the genius that he would come up with.
You should just throw yourself down at his feet and co-write it with him.
Yeah, I suppose that would help. I just hold his bag as he did it. I don't think I could even co-write with him, to be honest. He's such a brilliant writer. And most of his writing we don't see and we don't know, because he does a lot of script doctoring for Hollywood movies, uncredited. So he gets a huge amount of money. That's why we don't see many plays of his these days, because he spends most of his time script doctoring. And he'll get, some script that needs a huge amount of work, and he'll just say, right, this is what needs done. I'm not 100% sure here, but I think he did the changes to the Gladiator. The Russell Crowe.
And he did most of the work on Shakespeare in Love.
Yeah, did most of the work in Shakespeare in Love. And the Gladiator, the whole thing about, touching the corn as he walks through, and that sense of impending death, and the fact that he doesn't mind about dying, but all he has to do is avenge, his family. That was apparently all Stoppard, but it gives a sort of central backbone to the movie that perhaps it wouldn't have had otherwise, and that's what he does.
I did meet him.
You did?
I didn't quite throw myself at his feet, but I did kind of quiver and not be able to say anything. I'm not worthy.
Yeah, and he was married to Felicity Kendall as well for many, many years.
Yeah, don't get into that.
No, that's... I get all upset about that. Yeah. Anyway, yes, Diane, I know your name now.
Yes.
Yes.
Just wondering, does this tie up Peter's book tie up everything neatly, or will this be another sequel that you'll be looking at?
The Constant Rabbit?
Yes.
No, it is a complete it's standalone. There is no, I've not planned a sequel at all. It's just one on its own. It actually, what I was pleased about it when I started writing it is that I had an ending quite early on, which I really liked. A really real pow ending, and I thought, brilliant, that's good. So I was really happy that it actually had a good ending, and we could actually then, write the book and everything would work. So no, it's a standalone, but who knows? No, I think it is. It's just one. Yeah. Yes.
I spoke to you about this yesterday, but can you tell us about your choice to not use any pronouns for Charlie and Horizon?
Oh yeah, the no pronouns. This is no gender pronouns for Charlie in Early Rising. Who spotted that? Most people? Who didn't spot it? Okay, quite a few. Yeah, this was an interesting idea. Originally Charlie was a bloke, right? And whilst I was writing it, I just suddenly was interested in putting no gender pronouns on Charlie. But the tricky bit about it is not actually doing that, but actually making it appear as though making it not obvious. Right, that is actually really, really difficult to do.
Work for me.
Yeah, there you go. So I mean, because obviously, you know, I'm a male writer and it's my book, then there is presumably a natural assumption that you can make, whether that's the correct assumption or not. And I wanted to have really, it could be either, you know, male, female, and the story could work in either ways. But also, I think something else that interests me as I suddenly had this idea, and when you're writing, you do have suddenly these ideas, and you go, well, what if I could do that, and whether that would work, and then you start rewriting the story with this in mind, and you say, okay, male and female, you know, let's write it in a different way. And then I sort of suddenly thought, well, okay, you could have two books here. So you could read the book one way, and then you could think, well, that's a bit odd, and then you go back and read it again, and all these little subtle little references here and there could actually mean something completely different. And I think that's quite an exciting way to write books, is that you've got a book that works, you think, in one way, and then you have this extra information, and then it works in an entirely different way. But it could work in the first way as well, you know. So I don't specify and won't specify what I think Charlie's gender is, but potentially it could be read either way. But who knows? For me, it was kind of experimental, and also, you know, in this day and age, when gender identity is an issue and people are talking about it, I think it's important. Then I think it behoves me as an author writing, you know, in this part of history to include it as a potential talking point, perhaps. So, and again, to write without risk is not really writing at all. I've had very positive feedback about it. From people who are non-binary, and they say, yes, we like this. You know, it doesn't work as a non-binary character, and I said, well, I can't, you know, because you could say male, female, or other, right? And I was really male or female. I wasn't saying as other, and they said, well, okay, that's fine, because, you know, that's not an area I understand. But it's had very positive feedback from people who liked it a great deal, because it was a question that was very big on their radar, and they saw it reflected in the mainstream book. Yeah.
Can we ask what people's first assumption was if it was male, female,
Oh, the whole book. Yeah, why not? So we want a hands up. Like, who assumed straight away that Charlie was a bloke? Okay, so that's sort of that's 2/3 of the room, 3/4 of the room. Okay, who assumed that Charlie was female? Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so we have a small proportion.
And we thought that there was non-binary.
Yeah, yes. So we've got 1 there.
Well, it never occurred to me to think about Charlie's gender at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And maybe that is actually what is important, is that it's not important. It doesn't matter that that what Charlie was thinking was, we're thinking of someone who feels love and protection and empathy, towards someone like Gita, and actually it was.
Well, in early riser, Charlie is not a breeder, so
Yeah.
that's really the female identifier, is whether or not you're going to get pregnant.
Yeah.
So we don't see that, so Charlie could be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are small references. There is a backstory in there, but you have to work very hard to find it.
I don't know if I'm thick, but I just didn't care.
What? Sorry?
About Charlie, whether it was male or female. I read the book, and it wasn't until afterwards I thought, I won.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But great. That's the fact that you were afterwards. You were going, well, that's a bit strange.
But it wasn't until afterwards.
Yeah. But then Fforde is a bit of a red herring to throw you off the scent.
Yes.
Because why would I do that twice? So and that was interesting as well, I thought.
But you do that with other aspects of Charlie's description, which I don't want to spoil for anybody who hasn't finished it.
Yeah.
So Charlie is not like iconified from page 1 anyway, and we learn things later that we didn't realize.
Yeah.
So I think I like how that's just sort of, Charlie is this, and it doesn't matter because it doesn't affect the main character. So I like how the ambiguity about the gender was like a momentary question, and then it didn't matter. And I love that we're being able to start articulating those kinds of moments in fiction, because I think it makes it more accessible.
Yeah, great. Isn't it great? I mean, this is what I like about writing. You know, not just the fact that I write this stuff, but also that it's then interpreted by you guys in all these kind of interesting ways, and that you'll bring your view to the book. Because I think, and this goes right back to what I was saying in Maybe Lost in a Good Book or Well of Lost Plots, is that it's an immensely imaginative process, reading a book. You know, that reading a book is just as imaginative as writing it. And when you read a book, everybody's reading is different, because everyone is different. And they will bring their own politics to it, their own thoughts, their own history, their own future, their aspirations, and they will bring that into the book. So what I'm doing is I'm putting sort of the bare bones down. What authors do is they put their bare bones down, and then you clothe it with a greater and more, you know, brightly coloured clothes, which I think is what one should do as an author. That everything is not always there. Everything is not always on the page. The rest of it, the exciting bit, the bit that makes it most personal to the reader, is the stuff that you add. You know, so never describe something too much, because that's your job. You know, and I think it makes for a more interesting read. Yeah.
But once you've got to make things on the telly, doesn't that sort of take all that away?
Well, watching telly, yeah, I mean, that's why I think, I mean, telly is a good medium. You know, don't get me wrong, I think it's a good medium.
I think about your books.
Oh, my books. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I don't sort of let them be made. I mean, I do occasionally. But I think reading is a truly imaginative process, because you're investing a lot of energy and thought process into doing them. So it's an active sort of imaginative reading. Whereas watching like Game of Thrones, I think is passive entertainment. You know, there obviously are nuances that you can pick up and you understand what's going on, but I think it is a more passive sense of entertainment. And that's why I think, books and novels, are I think the sort of preeminent entertaining medium on the planet. Because not only are you engaging in the characters and situations and everything, but you're actually doing a lot of that yourself. And you're feeding your own imagination, you're questioning yourself, you're empathizing, all those sort of things. All those reasons that everyone's always said that reading is so good for everyone, not just children, but everybody. But I think it's an active form of imaginative entertainment, whereas movies and TV are more of a passive, not totally, but more a passive form of entertainment.
So how does it affect writing the next book when the previous one has been put on the screen?
Oh, I don't know. It never happened to me. I don't know. But R.R. Martin is getting a bit in the... I mean, there's all sorts of things going on. I haven't watched Game of Thrones since I think the third season.
About Game of Thrones. I was thinking about you've now had one book that's been on screen.
Yeah.
And you're still writing that sequence of books.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So how does what happened when it was put onto the screen affect when you write the next book?
Right. Nothing at all. I don't think of what's on the screen at all. I will write the sequel of Dragon Slayer, the fourth Dragon Slayer, fourth and last Dragon Slayer, based only on the 3 books.
Right.
Only on the 3 books. The last Dragon Slayer, the film, was not really. It didn't cover a lot of the areas in which I wanted it to cover. When we had the initial meeting with them, I was saying, this is about how greed is easy to generate and love is much harder to generate, and that's one of the things that I thought was important in the book. And they went, yeah, whatever. Actually we need to bring in our antagonist earlier and have an action sequence within the first 10 minutes. Okay, and I went, okay, left them to it. So no, I won't think of the Dragon Slayer, the movie, when I'm doing the sequel. I'll just be basing it on the 3 books before it.
On that point, I think a lot of people, once a book has been made into a film, it feeds back to people saying, oh, you have to change your imagination so it looks as it is on the screen. And it really puts a stop on your imagination.
Well, I mean, I think this is why, you have a sort of favourite book or something and somebody makes a movie of it and you go, oh, it's nothing like the book. How can it be? It can't be like the book, because the book, you've made your own. You've clothed it in that extra finery. You've made it something that is very personally yours. Maybe because it's you when you wrote it, when you read it. If you read it when you were a teenager, of course, the book is entirely different. So it can never look really as though you imagined it. Sometimes it can. If you've ever seen Touching the Void by Joe Simpson, it was a climbing book, and he falls off he falls off a crevasse, and his friend lets him go. He basically lets the rope go as he's lowering him down with 2 broken legs, and they have to deal with that. If you watch the film, it's exactly like the book. It's a brilliant film. It's a brilliant book. The English Patient, I thought, was a better film than it was a book. I far more enjoyed it as a movie than I did as a book. But for the most part, they can never match up. They can't. It's impossible. Derek.
Going back to early riser, what was your concept behind the sense of smell? Because you put a lot of importance on it and the descriptors than you normally would.
Yeah, this is quite interesting because I think Charlie refers to everybody by what they smell like and gives them 3. And there's always a rule of 3 that comes into writing. And it's a very 3 bears, 3 blind mice. Everything's in rule of 3. Even if you go to writing college to write about things, they always say rules of 3. You get funny, funnier, funniest. Bad, awful, horrendous. You don't do just 2, you've got to go 3. There's got to be this midway. 3 acts, that's why 3 acts work. There's this rule of 3 that comes in everywhere. So that's why, in 3s. But also, I think it was one of those things that doesn't particularly have any reference to anything, only that smells don't really exist in books, because they don't really, generally. So I wanted to just use that as a sort of motive for Charlie's view on what someone is like. So when Charlie hugs, I can't remember his name now, the one who's the loans money. What was his name? Treacle. Yes, yeah, if you're in a jam called Treacle. Yeah, I like that. He says he smells like sort of damp string of ink or something like that. And those kind of smells, I think, they do evoke a character of someone. And I don't recall a time when I've read that being done. And it was just like what you do when you're writing is you have these experiments that you want to do, like Charlie. And I thought, no, let's have Charlie, regard everyone as the kind of smells that they are. And I think shamanic bowl sort of smells of coffee, saffron, and sort of a little bit of beer or something. And I thought that makes sense, So it was just me experimenting with the character studies by smell. It's an all 3 thing.
I liked it. It's good.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir.
What sort of input or direction do you have on?
Oh, I can't hear you at all.
Yeah. What sort of input or direction do you have on a book that's outside the story? So the covers, the typeface.
Oh, I see. The production of the book. Yeah, the actual physical production of the book. Typeface, only when I want to do things like have superscript or subscript, or when I want to change the font, because I think in Well of Lost Plots, people speak in Courier Bold, don't they? Yes. And no one can understand them, which was a really nice trick I nicked from Asterix and Cleopatra, if you recall, where they couldn't understand. What did he say? What did he say? And it's just lovely. It's such a beautiful joke. And I wanted to use that idea, homage, not stealing, as we say. So in that respect, and you actually have to say that, and they get all grumbly, because it annoys them when they have to do things like that. But they were fine. And superscript and subscript, if you want somebody saying something in a tiny, tiny voice, that was quite a battle using superscript inside TypeScript because it doesn't really work. So that was that. Covers, they contractually, my publishers have the final say, right? Final say. But obviously, it's a back and forth. I'll have ideas of what I think it would work. They have ideas, and sometimes I come up with a good idea and they use it. Other times I don't, and they come up with a much, much better cover. Sometimes we go around the houses and we come back to basically what I wanted. The Thursday Next series, which have a sort of Pulp Fiction-y kind of look to them with the cars on the front, that was kind of how I saw them to begin with. But they began the series with just a tiny little gold dodo and a blank red cover, which I think was probably actually right. Because I don't know these things. I don't work in marketing and publicity. So you have to obviously give. These people are, very good at what they do, and they do it every day. So you have to take what they say. You can't go, no, I want this, because then you just become, an annoying author. Because I think they get quite a lot of those. The cover for, the original cover, I don't even remember it, for Shades of Grey, it had the painting by numbers. Remember that? On the hardback, it was all white with painted by numbers. Now that was the colour of the proof, right? So they do a proof to send it out to, pre-readers and journalists. So that was the cover on the proof, and that was the idea I gave them. I said, well, why don't you do it as a painting by numbers, right? And then just have little numbers and just do a painting of, stuff that's in the world. And they went, yeah, okay. And then they went on this huge, interesting sort of jaunt to try and redesign the cover. And they had all sorts of stuff, which cost a lot of money. They built things out of cardboard and then photographed it and this and that and the other. And we went to a meeting and we were staring at them, and the marketing and publicity people were desperately trying to sell this to us, and the designers were trying to sell it to us. And I sort of looked at my editor, Carolyn, and I said, do you know what? I really liked the cover that was on the proof. And she went, absolutely. Right, yes, absolutely. And the meeting was over. And everyone was going, yeah. So, sometimes it's just things like that. And all the money they spent, all the stuff they spent on doing that cover, I've got some mock-ups still in my office, but never used. Never used. So, it's input, it's a back and forwards, but basically, they have the final say. But we need to make it work between us, it's a team effort. Yeah, yes?
It's not a question, but just as a reader, I quite like it when you bring out a new book, if there's a colour that matches the other book.
Yeah, you want the covers to kind of match, I know. A lot of that, again, is marketing, and I don't really have so much say so in it. But the paperback, the last Thursday Next paperback, I think we were trying to get a hardback that matched, because a lot of people were complaining that the hardback didn't match the other hardbacks and all kinds of stuff. We try our best. Yes?
Kind of going back to that, when you signed your first book and signed your first contract, was there a lot of pressure to just sign whatever the contract said, or did you push back on anything?
No, I just, give me the pen.
Yeah.
When you've been trying for 12 years to get a publisher, and you've written 7 books, as I had, and then Hodder, of all people, Hodder and Stoughton are saying, we'll publish the Aerofair, and plus one other book, we'll give you a 2-book deal, and where do I sign? It really is that. And anyway, you have agents, to deal with that, and the agents, it was a standard contract, so absolutely fine. No, they weren't trying to. Why would they try and rip me off? It's of no benefit to them, none at all, because if it's, they want to keep me.
It was more that I've seen a lot of standard publishing contracts where they include like film rights and everything like that straight off the back.
What, really? What, publishers take that?
Yeah.
Well, you're with it, but no, absolutely not. That's then with the wrong publishers. Or that's a publisher who, is trying to, hoover up rights perhaps. But no, you'd never give that away. If somebody tried that, you'd go, oops, no, come on, and they'd realise, go, all right, So no, that would be a publisher who was trying to take the piss, essentially, and that's why we have good agents, because they'd go, no, what are you trying to do? Don't be ridiculous, So I didn't have to change anything. Yeah.
You mentioned that you had the ending to The Constant Rabbit sort of in mind from quite early on.
Yeah.
Did you find it more difficult or not to steer your plot to that ending than a story where you didn't necessarily know the ending at the time?
I kind of knew where I had to get them to, and in that respect, getting there was a bit easier. But it was just the journey really, so that the characters can be in the same place at the same time. So because obviously my character has to witness. It's first-person narrative, so my character has to be in that particular place, and how you get them to that place, and how possibly you get them to that place. And in the end, the book dictated the way in which I was writing the book, and the way in which I was, inverting stereotypes, inverting tropes. Because I was very conscious that obviously I can't have a white saviour trope in this book, but if I can invert that trope successfully, then I can actually use that to my advantage. So there's all sorts of ways in which the way in which the book was writing itself, the way in which I was, talking about things in the book, and the way in which storytelling should and should not work in a book at this time, actually allowed me to do several things that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So that works in that respect. But yeah, I mean, half the difficulty with writing a book is obviously to get your character A to character A all the way from here to there with the obstacle course that they eventually get there. And it's just figuring out the obstacle course. But it'll work out in the end, I think. Yeah.
Kind of on that, have you ever had an ending in mind, and then as you wrote, it became a different story with a different ending?
Yeah, very much so. The early riser, the ending that you see in Early Riser is the fourth ending. Right, each one absolutely different. Absolutely different. I wrote one ending which no one ever read. The second ending was read by my publisher. I gave him three drafts, which is very unusual for me. But I hadn't delivered a book for 2 years, so I had to give them something. So they hadn't thought I'd gone all Jack Torrance on them. Anyone know that reference? Yeah, from The Shining. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Yep.
Yeah, so they thought I hadn't gone all Jack Torrance on them. So I had to give them something, so I gave them this terrible book, 180,000 words. It was awful. I'm sure they didn't read all of it, with the most sort of dark down ending imaginable. And they said, yeah, it really didn't work. So the ending was completely different. I rewrote it again to be utterly different again, the ending of Early Riser. And again, Carolyn said that it really doesn't work, that ending. I think it's got to be a bit more up. And I went, okay, what can I do? And I was clearly feeling a little better by that time. And the ending that you see now, which I think works and looks as though it was always going to be that ending, oddly enough. It all seems to head towards that way. So when you have a new ending, then of course the book has to change to accommodate the ending. If you can, figure that, So everything that leads up to the ending obviously has to be changed. You can't just change the ending. Everything leads up to it, all the characters and where they end up and the journey all comes together. So often, no, not at all. Not at all. Interestingly, the air affair, I mean, one of the things I like about the air affair is the fact that, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't read the air affair, that Thursday changes the end of Jane Eyre, the book, and improves it. That Jane Eyre does not go to India with Sindred Rivers, as was the terrible ending, but actually a really good ending. Oh, okay, we burned down Thornfield Hall, but they get together, and the mad woman dies. A bit dodgy, that really, but but that only arrived like 3 weeks before I submitted the book. Right, and that's a major part of the story and a major part of the ending, and having characters from the Eyre affair, from Thursday's world, do have their opposite number in Jane Eyre. Right, so Daisy Butler is the kind of Blanche Ingram, is it, character? And all that, they do have their opposite numbers. That Landon is a kind of Rochester, and he's missing a leg, if you remember. Yeah, so a lot of them, but all that kind of stuff really came in that last 3 or 4 weeks, and that was then made the ending work much, much better. And that's what I mean by you have a different ending, and then you go, oh, right, if that's the ending, I have to go really comb it through and make it all work for that new ending. Yeah, ending books is hard, really hard, really, really hard. Yeah.
So does that mean, you know how with like DVD releases and films, we get the deleted scenes? Or we were going to get a special edition.
You would not want to read it. You would not want to read it. I do have deleted scenes on my websites and the special features. Yeah, I've done that for a while. I don't know. I mean, it's just not worth it. I mean, the reason that you get deleted scenes on DVDs, and when you watch them, you realise why they were deleted. I mean, it's very simple. You go, yeah, I know why. It was terrible. I mean, it's no wonder they cut it out. So getting a possible other version of my book. Now you just read it and you go, oh my God, this is awful. He was right. It's terrible. It's terrible.
We can appreciate your genius.
Oh,
stop. Right, really bad deleted scene.
Yes, yeah. No.
So when you involved dream topping in a book's plot, did you start with the idea of dream topping, or did that come later?
Dream topping. So this is a nanotechnology nightmare scenario. I think I'd read about nanotechnology and little nanobots which wouldn't stop creating themselves, and I kind of like that. I read it in a news story, some New Scientist or something, and I thought, well, we could do that. We could do that, and why don't we do it with dream topping? So dream topping taking over the world. But then also, I was doing a time travel thing as well, and I thought, well, why can't we suddenly do an interesting reverse on it? So the primordial soup from which we all sprung was actually dream topping. And that was the reason that there are any creatures on the planet at all, is because this interesting reverse. And that's what I kind of, when I talk about, narrative dares and the sort of logical sort of conclusion of an idea, logical progression of an idea, is I take an idea and I go, okay, where can I go with this? And where can I go with it within the narrative of the book? And I thought, well, I have a time traveler. Yes, of course, that totally works. And I think doesn't he start changing to dream topping? And he sacrifices himself. He says, right, just press the emergency button and pop myself, 1.2 billion years into the past where I can do no harm. And here we are. So it worked, Although they did call it Miracle Whip in the States, which isn't the equivalent at all.
No, it's dream topping. Yeah.
Oh, is it?
But we didn't know what it was. We were like, what's dream topping?
Oh, right. And so Miracle Whip is dream topping.
Cool Whip.
No, it is. Yeah, Miracle Whip is like a mayonnaise.
It's like mayonnaise.
Yeah, so they got it wrong in the US version of the book. So the translation wasn't quite right. It should be, it's a pudding, which I actually quite a guilty pleasure. I do quite like it, dream topping. Butterscotch especially, it's rather yummy, much I quite like. They just drop in your lap sometimes. You think, what can I do with this? I've got an idea, but I must be able to do a little bit more with it. So I sort of, reverse it and use it, and all of a sudden it works. Yeah.
Sorry, one
Yeah.
minute. Can I have the room key, please? Small one.
There you go. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Well, tell me when I stop. Sorry. 1 o'clock. That was 8 minutes ago. Okay, should we have one more question? Anyone dying to ask one more question? Yes. Yeah.
Can you tell us a story about your brother Matthew?
A story about my brother Matthew. Oh, okay. A story about my brother Matthew. Well, he was very eccentric. He still is. He lives in Rome nowadays. But I always remember he had a sense of humour that it wasn't about telling jokes. It wasn't about telling funny stories. It was about doing odd things, right? So he used to have this sort of thing where we're 4 years apart, right? And I'd be aged 8, and he would sort of come up to me. I'll try and do a sort of Brother Matthew thing, if you can imagine. So he used to sort of come up to me, and he used to sort of go and then sort of put his hands on my head like that, and go. And it was unbelievably funny. It was so completely random. It was so completely random and daft that it was immensely amusing. And I don't know, there were all sorts of funny things that he used to do. And I dedicated the Big Over Easy to him because he sort of illuminated my childhood. But he just used to do very, very odd things. Very odd things. And I'm trying to remember, he wrapped his best friend in an eiderdown. Before the days of duvets, we had eiderdowns. You used to have blankets and an eiderdown. It's just like a duvet, and you've got a cover. So he wrapped his best friend in an eiderdown and pushed him downstairs. Right, and we had the stairs in our house had 2 returns on them. So there were 2 returns, right? So you have a return there, and then you have another return there. It's quite a big house in London. And he got him to the top. He also gave him quite a big shove because he wanted to try and get him to the bottom. Right, so he wrapped him in the eiderdown and then just went, like that. And David Brennan, his name was, went, like in a comedy sort of, and went, boom, 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 went around, and I was watching and I was going, well, he won't get past the first corner. He did. And he went past the second corner and ended up on the floor of the hall, right, and sort of got up looking very dazed, and my mother came out, what's going on? And Matthew went, I pushed David down the stairs. And she went, why? And David just ran a bit thinking, and he went, I wanted to know what it looked like. and I was, by this time, in peals of hysterical laughter, because it was just so funny and random, and it was just this bizarre sense of humour that he had, that I really enjoyed. He was just great. He was great comedy. Always up to silly stuff and saying bizarre things. Yeah, very, very odd. I really, good bloke. Good bloke. Anyway, so that's it. Right, thank you very much indeed. I hope you enjoyed that. Keep it to yourself. Spoiler alert, just for you guys and me, obviously. And whatever next is next. What is next?